As the ceasefire is declared in Gaza, due to begin on Sunday, and we will see about that, not least as the Israeli state continues its genocidal onslaught on Gaza, it's time to take stock. Joe Biden, the President of the United States, who will rightly go down in history as a monster, said this.
This is the ceasefire agreement I introduced last spring.
One caveat here, how sentient this man is, open to debate, but what were he and his advisors thinking when they decided he should say that? Did they think it would reflect well on him, that this would mean he would get some credit? Does he not realise how incriminating this is? Indeed, what has been underlined by latest developments is that the United States, which provides Israel with the overwhelming majority of its weapons, as well as aid and diplomatic support, we could go on, the US has almost total leverage over what Israel does in these circumstances. That Netanyahu signed up to a deal that was on the table last spring is because, let's say it, Donald Trump used some sort of leverage, which Biden refused. There's going to be some heavy caveats here. Don't worry, I've got onto them. Now, according to the Washington Post, a diplomat briefed on the ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas credited progress in the talks in part to the influence of President-elect a deal. According to the Times of Israel, a tense weekend meeting between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and incoming Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff led to a breakthrough in the hostage negotiations, with the top aide to the US President-elect Donald Trump doing more to sway the Premier in a single sit-down than outgoing President Joe Biden did all year, two Arab officials told the Times of Israel on Tuesday. Trump triumphantly posted on Truth Social, "We have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Thank you." All in capitals, characteristically. Now the scenes, understandably, of Palestinians in Gaza celebrating. Any respite whatsoever, given what they've gone through, is something which has overwhelmed so many of them. That includes, of course, children who've suffered so much. Let me give you some context about Joe Biden. Let's do this. The two consistent themes of his policy on Israel and Palestine since the 7th of October 2023 are the same as they've been throughout his entire political. And that is, firstly, Israel is an invaluable strategic asset to the United States. And the second is that Palestinian life does not matter very much at all. And those are overriding considerations. Now, this isn't hyperbolic. Let me read from a long read. It was published last March in the London Review of Books. It was penned by the Indian essayist and novelist Pankaj Mishra. It refers back to 1982, when Israel had invaded Lebanon, inflicting terrible atrocities as it did so, led by Menachem Begin, the leader of Likud, of course the party later led by Benjamin Netanyahu. In the run-up to the establishment of Israel, Begin was a terrorist leader. Now, one of the atrocities committed in Lebanon was the massacre at Sabra and Shatila, in which Israel's allies slaughtered up to 3,500 civilians, mostly Palestinians and Lebanese, with unspeakable crimes. I mean, it's a horror. And it should be noted the Minister of Defense, Ariel Sharon, was forced to resign and found culpable for that massacre. Now, Israel's behaviour was too much for the then Republican President Ronald Reagan, who, as Beirut was assaulted, rang Begin and ordered him to cease what he described as a Holocaust. Begin was angry, but he complied. Now, with that context, let me read this passage. In 1982, shortly before Reagan bluntly ordered Begin to cease his Holocaust in Lebanon, a young US senator who revered Elie Wiesel as his great teacher met the Israeli Prime Minister. In Begin's own stunned account of the meeting, the senator commended the Israeli war effort and boasted that he would have gone further, even if it meant killing women and children. Begin himself was taken aback by the words of the future US President Joe Biden. "No, sir," he insisted. "According to our values, it is forbidden to hurt women and children, even in war. This is a yardstick of human civilization, not to hurt civilians." Well, he didn't abide by it then. If that's a yardstick of civilization, where does that leave Israel today? Absolutely incredible stuff. Let's be very clear. Joe Biden is an anti-Palestinian racist. He clearly does not believe that Palestinian life has any significant worth. The occasional hand-wringing you have seen from him has all been for show, to try and diffuse growing domestic anger as well as backlash abroad. He has gladly, proudly kept arming Israel to the teeth as it has butchered Palestinians in this genocidal mayhem, offering a record amount spent on US military aid to Israel. Now let's go through caveats, and these are big caveats. Israel is bombarding Gaza at the moment, and history tells us they will use the period leading up to Sunday's ceasefire to slaughter as many Palestinians as they can. Dozens are now reported killed since the ceasefire announcement. At one hospital, Ali Arab Hospital, 53 victims who were killed were admitted their bodies because of Israeli bombing since the announcement of the ceasefire. 18 women, 18 children, 4 men, 3 elderly. If that happened in Britain, just that one massacre, well, I mean, these were different massacres, presumably, that would be a national tragedy remembered for generations. And compared to Gaza's pre-war 2.3 million, it would shatter society here. Everyone would just be, it would just be shattering in terms of just how devastated so many people would be. It would be like national mourning, remembered for decades. One of the great tragedies of post-war Britain. That's just one massacre. That's just one group of, it's like it's nothing. But it is. It's everything. Every single one of those people, an entire universe extinguished. But you know what I mean. But what of Donald Trump? Trump is no friend of the Palestinian people, and he has nominated pro-Israel, anti-Palestinian zealots to his incoming administration. Back in November, just after Trump's victory, I posted, "Here's what I think may happen. Donald Trump grants Israel annexation of the West Bank in exchange for Israel winding down its its full-scale onslaught against Gaza in favour of quieter, gradual strangulation so he can present the latter as a win. Now, as Mohammed Shahada, a brilliant Palestinian analyst, put it, Trump offered a gift bag in return for a Gaza deal, lifting all sanctions on Israeli extremists, settlers and spyware companies, major land thefts in the West Bank permitted, Israel violating the ceasefire all they want. As Mike Waltz, the national security pick for Trump, told an Israeli newspaper, if the IDF is required to enter Gaza again, we are with them. Hamas will not continue to serve as a terrorist organisation and will not rule Gaza. Let's listen to what he said on this podcast. Mike Waltz says.
And from your perspective, if this deal goes through and we enter what's characterized as the first phase, does that effectively mean the war is over? Does a ceasefire mean that its work is done in Gaza for the foreseeable future?
Well, I certainly think Hamas would like to believe that, but we've been clear that Gaza has to be fully demilitarized. Hamas has to be destroyed to the point that it cannot reconstitute, and that Israel has every right to fully protect itself. So, all of those pieces.
That's worth emphasising that the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, this week declared that according to US assessments, Hamas had recruited almost as many new militants as they had lost. Now, what is Waltz talking about here? Given the apocalyptic barbarism unleashed against Gaza now since October 2023, what on earth is he possibly endorsing that he thinks will achieve a different outcome? What level of violence? Can you even imagine it? Trump is no peacemaker. Don't be fooled. It's worth noting that last time he became president in 2016, he dramatically escalated airstrikes in Afghanistan, which meant a surge in civilian deaths, even as he paved the way for the inevitable US acceptance of strategic military defeat in Afghanistan. Now, for those who believe the genocide is over, I'm afraid a bitter appointment with a grim reality beckons. Indeed, what's left of Gaza? I mean, it's not habitable as it stands or as it lies in ruins. Most of its infrastructure is in ruin. Its hospital system is destroyed. Its domestic food production and agriculture is ruined. I mean, just one statistic, 83% of plant life has been destroyed. That was months ago, by the way, the estimate. Whatever happens, there has to be accountability. The Democratic administration, Joe Biden, Antony Blinken, and yes, Kamala Harris, they need to go to jail. Level of evil. Then we are paving the way for a future of unspeakable barbarism and thus paving the way for the destruction of our own species, which I have to say I think increasingly hangs in the balance. We need accountability for other leaders as well. That includes Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, who at the beginning of this genocide declared Israel had the right to cut off the basic essentials of life to the civilian population of Gaza. He has issued a statement now about the ceasefire and it's absolutely disgusting. In that statement, he talks of Hamas being brutal terrorists, Israelis suffering the deadliest massacre in terms of the Jewish people since the Holocaust, brutally ripped, he says, from their homes, held captive in unimaginable conditions, being murdered. I think we'd agree, extremely emotive language. But when he talks about Palestinians, he just says they have simply lost their lives. That's what he says about the traitor, identified, nothing that in any way shows kind of an emotional response to what they've gone through. It's like some act of God or natural disaster. There was no evidence, zero evidence, in fact, that this man truly believes that Palestinians have equal worth as human beings. And it's very clear to me that he believes Palestinian life is worth a fraction of Israeli life, and a pretty small fraction at that. Finally, let's think of the Palestinian. They've suffered so much. They did everything they could to show the world the horror, the barbarism being inflicted on their own people, all while they have suffered the biggest slaughter of journalists in history. They were the eyes and are the eyes and ears of the world in a time of unspeakable evil. One by one, or sometimes more than one at a time, they were butchered, sometimes alongside their families and their little children, burned alive, blown to pieces, buried under rubble and suffocated. They had one objective above all that, to convince the world that Palestinian life matters, that the worth of a Palestinian is no less than the worth of anybody else, that their suffering matters, that their pain matters, that they deserve the right to live, to flourish and to be happy, not to be trapped in a killing field and reduced to ash. They were and they are lights in the darkness, the most courageous journalists to ever walk the face of the earth, and we must never, ever, ever, ever forget what they've done. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts, your comments.